All right, we are live. Thank you for anyone who's tuned in to the Frightening Floyds podcast. Um, we have author Coyote Wallace on
That's
tonight,
me.
and he is the author of the book you all may have been seeing me push a whole lot lately. Him probably too, if you know him. American Mystic: The Life, Death, and Rebirth of Jimmy Wonderful. It is uh, a sort of a magical realism fantasy style book. Um, and it's definitely something that we were looking for. I was really looking for something different at Nightmare Press because we were trying to expand beyond only dark literature and horror. But I mean, there's still some dark tones to the story, but we're looking for more like fantasy and moving into other sort of realms. And I thought this was a perfect book. And of course, he'll probably want to tell you about being the first one signed twice during a submission. But before we get into all that other stuff, um, just I guess just go ahead and tell us a little bit about American Mystic.
All right. American Mystic, The Life, Death, and Rebirth of Jimmy Wonderful is a what I like to call gonzo fantasy tale. It combines elements of magical realism and modern fantasy with what's could arguably be called like the Hunter S. Thompson style of, narrative. Uh, it follows the titular character Jimmy Wonderful as he is summoned to the salt flats of Utah by industrialist Roy Altenhofen to make the case as to whether or not magic should continue to exist in the modern world. And it goes fucking off the rails.
Yeah, it goes around a little bit. That's for sure. We don't want to give away too much though.
No, no, no.
So what? Obviously, you're influenced by the work of Hunter, yeah, Hunter Thompson. And what other than just that sort of inspired you to write this book?
Um, One day I just recovered from like a really bad migraine, right? And I sat down at the computer and I was kind of just like spitballing like a humorous joke, like a gonzo take on like fantasy tropes and stuff like that, just to make my friends and stuff laugh on like Facebook. And my mentor, Satiros Bricado, Bill Bricado, um, was like, stop everything you're doing and turn that into a book. And and that's the story of how it happened, guys. That's I I once I dug into it, man, like everything just started hitting, and I fell in love with it. Right, like I've always loved like the sort of gonzo narratives, Fear and Loathing, Rum Diaries, the Kentucky Derby is decadent and depraved, stuff like that. But I was always also like a big fan of like Ed McClanahan and Garth Ennis, people like that. And I just wanted to do something that I hadn't seen before, that I hadn't really that I didn't see a lot of out there. Stuff like Transmetropolitan was a big influence on me. But even that, that's a kind of a gonzo take on the cyberpunk genre.
Is that the
And
guy? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just want to ask: is that the guy who wrote Crooked Little Vein as well?
I think I know somebody's going to fact check me out there if I say it
Yeah,
is. that
I
I'm
just
wrong.
want. I read that book a while back and I liked it. But anyway, go ahead with what you're saying. Sorry to interrupt you.
And you know, that was like a take on like a gonzo take on cyberpunk. And, I'd been seeing stuff like Bright, and my mentor, they designed the World of Darkness, which is, one of the greatest examples of magical realism applied to like, you know, storytelling that anyone can ever find. And it just clicked, right? Like once I got into like seeing how the world worked in my head, and getting the taste of how Jimmy saw things, and how he could spin them. It just all of it just pop. It's one of the easiest books I've ever written.
Yeah, I find that when you really like when the story in your mind is really resonating with you as a human being, it just seems to pop out like nothing. Like you start writing and it just goes, and it takes you. You don't take it, it takes you. So and but yeah, I definitely think that I was glad to see a submission like that when we had the submission called, because I'm a fan of magical realism, and I just felt like even on the big scene, especially on the indie scene, but even in big trade, there's not a whole lot of that left in the mainstream, and I would just like to see more of that exist, because I think it's a good blend of, because some people, the high fantasy is just too much, you know, unrealistic stuff for them. But then there's some people who like that fantasy still, but they want to see some real life, and it just makes a good match, I think.
Well, one of the things that I always enjoyed, like this is like a personal little hobby, or just how much of a dork I am, um, is when I'm watching like a fantasy movie or like something with magic or vampires or werewolves. I'm one of those people that will sit there and I will find like the little plot threads, like why the hell isn't someone recording this on their phone
Yeah,
or something like that, and I'll just tug, and from that, I can make jokes and create these humorous little situations, right? Like, and once you're able to do stuff like that, right there, like vampire Richard Nixon running for the presidency, guys.
yeah.
Once you start like tugging those threads, like it creates like some of the most organic yet surreal instances of storytelling that you can find. Like a lot of people will try to shy away from it and like sweep stuff under the rug, like the wizard who how does a wizard pay his rent, right? Like you just
Yeah,
conjure money out of your ass? Do you just
right.
like turn dog shit into gold? What's your plan there, G? And but little threads like that, you can pull and tug on those and just follow them, and they lead to some of the best stories you can find.
Yeah, I agree. I like that. I like when people get into those little nuances, those little details of what goes on in these characters' lives. I mean, if they do it well. I mean, of course, you don't want someone just writing about the main character going to the bathroom, but I mean, unless something like cool happens, right?
It should never happen. Never there. Never that
Never,
scene.
yeah, never.
That's
And
my
like talking
writing
about
tip
how
for
they
the
pay
day.
rent. Well, that kind of reminds me. You recently posted something about haunted houses and exorcisms, and me and I believe it was Phil too, who was telling you should make that into a story. Would you want to
I,
talk a little bit about that?
oh yeah, of course, right? Like most of my story ideas, a disproportionately large amount of them, actually come from jokes, right? Like just screwing around, and like it always seems like the stuff that like I sit down and if I sit down and I'm like, oh, I'm going to turn a story into this, like it always falls a little flat. But if it's when it's something like that, and like I start noticing people are like, hey man, you should really do that, and it's usually something good. Just as a concept, I just thought it would be hilarious. Like you try to imagine ghosts and spirits and all of this, still having to put up with the regular everyday human bullshit. And then I mean, I just
What was it? You said something to the effect of like how the psychics, the ghost hunters always walk in. I feel a presence of evil, and the owners never like. The owners always. How come they never say, "Well, no shit. That's why I had you come in here. I didn't expect.
yeah, exactly right.
I didn't
Like, where
expect
is
you
that
to just
part
go
of
here."
like where's that part of like The Conjuring or paranormal activity? Where's the psychic that comes in and is like, no, man, you got fucking rats.
Yeah. Well, they did show that. Remember in The Conjuring, the first one, I think they showed where uh, Ed and Lorraine were upstairs in that attic, and they was like, "Oh, you're just hearing this door bang" or something like that. But they didn't really. That was just a small thing. Like they didn't make a whole story out of that. Which what was it? You called it the American Exorcism. The I can't remember the entire title name.
Gosh, what
The
was it?
Living the
American
Dead, the Filthy
Exorcism.
Rich, or something like that.
The quick, the dead, and the filthy rich.
Something like that. Yeah. I really think you ought to think about making that into a story for sure. So,
well, then I'd be so nice that you guys signed me thrice, right? Like,
yeah. Well, yeah. Well, I guess, yeah.
Might already be. Spoiler.
Yeah, might already be. So, you want to talk a little bit about Sarah Corbin's Bloody Revenge? We haven't gotten to that one yet, but it's already been signed, so we can talk about it.
Also, for all the aspiring writers out there, it's the expectation that you will actually remember what the hell your stories is about that will drive you crazy.
Yeah.
But no, Sarah Corbin's Bloody Revenge is my weird Western tale. It's a lot darker than American Mystic. It's not, designed to be like have elements of humor in it like American Mystic is.
Right. Yeah, it's much more serious than American Mystic.
It's very much a Western horror story. I'll tell you, I was actually inspired to write it by Marguerite Reed, wonderful author of Archangel, and like she does like a lot of like sci-fi Western stuff, right? And I wanted to try my hand at blending my weird styles with the Western genre. And Sarah Corbin's Bloody Revenge is the result of that. It's the tale of a homesteader family who are wrong place, wrong time, and a deal with the devil that brings Sarah back. And I make a good point of it's not like The Crow where The Crow is your hero. Sarah is very much not the hero of this story. I'll go ahead and tell you, this is just me putting the camera with the monster and just letting it go, right? Like I kind of dislike the notion that like so many of these stories, when they make like the badass hero, they just go on these big murder sprees and stuff like that. There's no consequence to it, no weight, no loss. And I really wanted Sarah Corbin's Bloody Revenge to capture that there is a cost to being a monster. There is a part of yourself that you lose and trade off in order to have revenge that doesn't come back. And it's not like a noble sacrifice. It's very much a selfish and destructive thing. And I like to say, and through that, I try to subvert a lot of Western tropes and stuff like that.
Yeah, we originally had I'm very much into that sort of thing, the Westerns and the Weird West. And I'm always looking for stuff like that as well. And we used to have an imprint, Wild West Press, where we had an anthology called The Dark Frontier, which was very much Western horror. It was meant to be Weird West in general, but it ended up being mostly Western horror. But when I read through Sarah Corbin, I was like, yeah, this is definitely something. And I was like, this is the same guy that sent American Mystic. But you definitely have a unique way of telling your stories, and not just in like the writing style. That's important too, but it's just like the overall theme and where you go with your stories. And there's more, I think, to be learned. There's something deeper in your stories than just what's there at the face value, like you were talking about with Sarah Corbin, how the price you pay for being a monster. And I think there's even like in American Mystic, there's a lot of looking at like prejudices and fear of sort of like xenophobia, I guess, but fears of people that are different, and such. And there's just it's an examination of just a lot of different things, and that's why I like what I read from you. So again, another thing that I liked is that I feel like you really take your craft seriously and being an author seriously, despite all the jokes and stuff I think that actually helps people become a little more, seriously. But your professional demeanor, I think your professional approach is your mindset is really something I think a lot of other authors have in this community, but they just don't get a chance to, I guess, show that and surround themselves with like-minded people. So you talk about having mentors. Is that like an approach you learned from them, being professional and wanting to push yourself as well as elevate everybody around you?
A lot of that is, yeah, I won't lie. Most of that, though, come like the jokes and all that stuff that I'm perpetually throwing out there. I learned a long time ago that as long as you can laugh, as long as you can still crack jokes about it, you're not all the way beat, right? Like people often underestimate the power of humor and its ability to steal power from those who would hold us down, right? I'm always ripping on the industry. American Mystic, that first part of American Mystic, there you're going to hear some of my thoughts on the damn industry. Um, but as long as you can laugh at it, as long as you can take that takes some of the teeth out of it, takes some of the bite. I'm a big believer that laughter is one of the most powerful things in this world, on this earth. Like a good joke can topple a whole regime, right? Like the most awful dictators and politicians have been at times completely upended just because someone was able to make it so that they weren't able to be taken seriously anymore.
Yep.
That now, as far as being professional and helping people, lift people up and stuff, I was very fortunate that my mentors found me and lifted me up and picked me up out of the nothing, because I was as low at the bottom as you can possibly get, right? Like I am not like a fancy college bred, degrees in literature and stuff like that. I didn't have rich parents. I didn't have a bunch of like opportunities to go out west and do this or that. I'm very much an East Kentucky trailer park white trash, like spawn of the mountains. And these people reached down and they picked me up, and they didn't have to, right? Like you're in the industry, you're a publisher, like the odds of someone who has made it reaching down and picking you up is, you've got better odds of getting struck by lightning, kids.
Yeah, twice.
I'll just go ahead and tell you, right? Like, but they picked me up and they taught me, and while teaching me, that rubs off, right? Like if somebody helps you, like if you're not a total sociopath, you're going to turn around and you're going to want to help other people. Mm-hmm. That's that's the kind of like the magic of doing good in this world, is that it spreads. Whatever you put out in this world, it spreads. You put out good, it spreads. You put out bad, it spreads. Mm-hmm. And they really helped me out, man. They lifted me up. I had no prospects, right? Like I'll tell you the story of how they actually found me. I was writing like little joke skits, little snips of dialogue, man, nothing else. And for people in like a Facebook group, just as like jokes, right? And like the guy whose books I used to hide under my mom's house to read, like messaged me out of nowhere. It was like you have talent. and right, like what the shit is this?
Yeah, is somebody playing a joke on me?
right, like hey, what are we... and I just never let go of it. Right, once I got that little tiny crack in the door, I was not about to give up. And through that, I've met so many wonderful people. I've been given so many awesome opportunities. Now, as far as taking it seriously, there are some people who would argue I might take it a little bit too seriously. I did make the dispatches from Appalachia, which is my nonfiction stuff, kids. If you ever feel like
I was
poking around there.
I was going to ask you about that, so feel free to talk about it. So.
Well, I made that, right, like in part because while I was writing Jimmy, writing American Wonderful, I needed to be, in the skin of a journalist. I needed to know and feel what that feels like, like I needed to develop that voice, which would become his voice. So I started the dispatches from Appalachia, and like the awesome little side effect is that, you know, I do get to call attention to many issues that affect people here in Appalachia. Now I get to share, you know, the stories of my past and my youth and stuff, and reach out and touch people, and, you know, matter to people. And, you know, I wouldn't have got to do that if not for the fact that I was trying to research Jimmy Wonderful and how he would sound and how he would, you know, write things out and approach things.
Yeah, and turned out pretty well for you. Your dispatches are pretty good too. Um, have you gotten much, feedback on those?
Oh, those are doing pretty well right now. The last time I took a shot at old JD Vance, I think we clipped like you know, upwards of 6,000, you know, people, you know, were responded to that. It's more people that lives in my hometown.
I think same for me too.
Yeah, right. Like, who knew that there was money to be made in making fun of JD Vance, right? Come on.
Yeah, well, it's like you said, the whole point of humor and that's why it's important with like some people feel in comedy that you should punch up and not down, and because punching up maybe helps, sort of bring light to certain things that are tyrannical, whereas punching down is just hitting people who are already down.
Yeah.
So when you take a swing at someone like JD Vance, there's going to be people who are going to take notice.
When you punch down, like, it's always easier, right? Like those were targets that everybody's already hit a dozen
Low
times.
hanging fruit.
Yeah, it always ages like milk. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But when you're fighting power, when you're throwing the punches up at like people who are, you know, in positions of privilege and stuff like that, like, you know, everybody likes to cheer for the underdog.
Yeah. Even though strangely, there's some people, if you make a joke about people in power or authority or people who are really wealthy, there's this strange like group of people, for one, who don't even seem to understand it's a joke. And two, they get really mad, and they're like no different than you or me. Like they're just regular people. They're not rich, they're not powerful, but they get really mad, and I don't understand that whole drive to protect those people from comedy, from jokes.
Celebrity worship is a weirdly American condition, right?
It is.
I don't
Yes.
think we don't have any like aristocracy, and our past isn't really like long enough to, it's not like Europe. And a lot of people feel connections to these celebrities or, you know, people from their favorite movies or whatever, and they lose track of the fact that there are no good millionaires. and that's kind of my line, my cutoff, right? Like if you're not a millionaire, I am probably never going to crack a joke about you. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you're just like out here being like some terrible racist dickhead.
Well,
And
yeah. Then you're not really joking. You're just calling them out for being how they are.
I wrote a new dispatch today about the vilification of gay kids and trans people in order to steal money from public schools here in Kentucky. So believe me, I can be pretty sharp when I get going.
Yeah, that could be a conversation in its own.
Oh yes, oh yes. You do not. I do not take well to people blaming the gay folks for things, and I damn well don't take well to no some bitch trying to take money from poor kids. So
Yeah, and that's really what it amounts to. Most of those politics, those ideas, they're not even really politics. They're just people trying to divide us. They're people who are doing a hell of a lot better than us, trying to divide us.
right,
And they don't actually. I don't think. I mean, there's some people who probably do care, that they really are offended by the LGBTQ community, QAIA community, and I don't understand why they would be offended by it. But I do think most people who use vilification against them don't even really care. They're just using it to make money, which is just as bad as actually feeling that way. So I mean, it's just really bad. That's why I don't get into identity politics and all that stuff too much, or politics anyway, because I feel like most of those politicians, they're just grabbing at money anyway, and they don't care. They're all part of the corporate nationalism that's going on in America.
I'm a big believer that ignorance, which is basically the root, ignorance and fear, which is basically the root of all racism and homophobia,
Or
can
any
large
discrimination, really. So,
can largely be dispelled with education and experience, right?
right.
Most of these people who are like, oh gosh, the trans people are coming for our children. They've never in their entire lives, not for 10 minutes, sat down and actually talked to like a trans person, right? Like they don't know anyone.
Right.
And and it's really terrible, these people who make ginning up fear, creating divisiveness, turning people against one another. They make that into their entire career. That's how they fund themselves, right? And they have no invested interest in ever trying to bring people together, because there's just so much money in splitting people apart.
And keeping power. Keeping
Right.
power and money. That's all. Yeah, that's all it is. Getting pretty heavy on the politics now.
Yeah. Here we go. That's the. It's because you picked a gonzo journalist. It's American Mystic.
Yeah.
The antagonist is literally a billionaire old white man. And
yeah, you don't want to get me talking about classism and class war. We've had this discussion. I'll go on all day, so I'm going to try to switch the topic. You made a Facebook post earlier that I really liked, and I think it's really like you said a lot that was important, and you talked about when you were. You've always had this drive to be creative, to be a writer. When your friends were playing video games, you opted out so you could go write. When they were doing role playing on Discord, you opted out to go write. And you talked about climbing a mountain. And have you been lucky enough to do this? Where you say yes, you have, but there's also a spark. And you said something about luck being the lightning bolt you have to climb the mountain to wait for. Elaborate on that so the people listening, or so the few people who might be listening or watching, will get a piece of it.
All right.
I think it's a good thing for people to hear.
A lot of people will get discouraged. I certainly got discouraged when I was starting out, because you'll be told that you have to have money to go to like writer retreats, or you got to pay money to get into these conferences and make your contacts. And if you don't have all the right contacts, or you don't have this, or you don't have that, all of which cost money, or at the very least opportunities that not everyone has, you get tempted to give up, right? Like you just pack it in, right? And you do not always have the good fortune of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. And I think that one of the things that defines those of us, who are in this for life, versus those of us who are like, well, I wanted to write a book just to cross it off the list. Those are
people like us.
Yeah. I know a couple of those fellows out there. And there's so much of this that you have to do without being able to see the light of that end of that tunnel, right? Like, you have to practice. It's not like I didn't wake up one day and was like, oh damn, I'm just suddenly good at this. No, it's a lot of writing. Even if it's trash, even if no one sees it, even if it ends up in a throwaway pile, or you're just doing fan fiction, or hell, even if you're stuck writing erotica for chump change on commission. I've been there, kids. I've been there.
Right, erotica for your own enjoyment.
Yeah, whatever it takes. Practice is practice. I mean, it has to be something that you just never let go of at all. Some of the best advice that I ever got came from Clinton Boomer. He a fantastic game designer. He told me, this is something, if you can imagine yourself. Hold on, cats just tried to fight each other on my lap. If you can imagine yourself doing anything else, right? Like, if you're in this just for the money, you're going to go broke. If you're in this for the fame, you're going to die without nobody knowing who you are.
Yep.
The only reason that anyone in the entire world should ever decide that they want to be a writer is because the idea of being anything else makes you want to, push your thumbs into your eyes.
Your cat's getting.
That's right. We got Zuli here. She's decided she wants to be a starlet.
Well, she's in the wrong place for that.
Yeah. This is an indie publisher, Zuli. You have to wait. Wait till we get Penguin on the line.
Yeah, we got Penguin Random House out here.
Yeah.
But yeah,
you have to really be willing to get down in the dirt and do this day in and day out. And it's not just writing. Like, you have to, like, I'm one of those people, like, if I'm not writing, I'm listening to music that has, tied into the theme of what I'm writing about. If I'm not listening to that music, then I'm, researching stuff. If I'm working on a novel, I will like watch nothing but things that are within that same theme vein, whatever, until I'm done. Like, I see way too many people who just kind of walk away sometimes or whatever, and it's not like that. Right? Not like that for me anyway. I'm not a muse writer, right? Like, I don't feel the inspiration today, guys. I'm just gonna go sit in my room and brood about it. No, fuck that. I'm poor, all right. So, and when you're poor, that's your fucking muse, right?
right.
What should I write about? I can't think of anything to write. Oh wait, I ain't got money for food. I better fucking think of something.
Yeah,
that's how it works.
yeah. There's something that's actually very similar to a conversation I was having with my associate Bobby, who is the president of Nightmare Press, who helps us run it, about people just walking away because they just feel like there's no real opportunity there. And what you said, and that kind of drove me to elaborate that that's kind of why that's part of what Nightmare Press stands for. And seeing authors, because obviously when someone submits to me, I don't really know their personality. I don't go out of my way to hunt them down on the internet. I'll look them up to see some stuff, what they've done and all that, just to get a feel for them. But that rarely ever plays into whether or not I do it. But it's nice when you do sign on. I see these people like you, and there's other authors who have been really out there busting their asses, and it makes, because I understand that I won't give up either. I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm really glad to see people like that and people like you being part of this. And I'm glad to have y'all. And I think it's really important that more authors who share your mindset and your view of things and similar views speak out more, because to be more, there's too many authors and publishers I've seen in the past who'd be like, well, it's really hard to be an indie publisher, or it's really hard to be an indie author. And they just talk about all the negative things. Whereas opposed to, you'll be like, you might preface your statement with something similar, but then you'll be like, but you got to work at it. And that's always been my attitude too. Like, if you want to be a writer, you write. And you said something one time, and I think you mentioned it just now. I'm sorry I'm cutting you off, but you said, even when you don't have the words, you sit down and write anyway and try to make them come out. And I think that's really important that people do that.
I'm a big believer that it's like a muscle, right? Like, if you work out like every single day, right? Like you're going to get fucking strong. You're going to get ripped, right? Like, that's the thing, right? But if you work out once or twice a week, I feel sore, I don't want to do it today. Well, then you're not going to get the same gains. That's just it's like anything else, man. Like the person who shows up and does the work is the person who reaps the benefits of the work. That's the like, too many people think that it's like some God-given like, no, mutant power, like no, it's it's practice. I promise, it is practice.
It's important that, like you mentioned, reading and listening to music. I mean, and it's true, the more you read, the more you'll even subconsciously begin to understand writing. And I'm the same way. Like, I listen to a lot of music that's similar to ideas that I have. Mine are usually incredibly weird ideas, so I end up listening to like progressive music or like psychedelic rock or stuff like that. Really weird crap, but no, I get it, and I think you're right. It's really important that people work on their abilities.
Now, if I was to like have to like actually attribute like, 'cause I hate like talk about like thinking that I'm talented or something like that. Right? I'm sitting there trying not to blush.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I was to have to attribute it to anything though, right? When I was a kid, when I was very young, my I was blessed enough to have a mother who was really, like encouraging about like reading and anything like that. And I discovered, the old White Wolf World of Darkness tabletop games, right? And they, these were just big giant books, right? And you're supposed to have like friends and dice, and like, it's like a social thing. Well, shit, I was out here in the middle of nowhere. I didn't have any friends. I didn't, and like there was no like groups or anything, and like so many people around here had like such a really satanic panic kind of mindset
Yeah.
that I couldn't even, I mean, I've written, about some of the terrible things that happened in that part of my life, and I used to take those books though because they would teach you how to like build a story, right? And the idea, in the books is that you're building this story for your 3 or 4 friends that are sitting around you at the table. But if you take all of those lessons and you completely remove all the parts about, friends and social groups, it's a guide. It's a damned guide in how to create a very rich and engaging story. Because, really and truly, that's all you're doing is making a world for the reader to immerse themselves in and get lost in. Like, if I do my job correctly, the reader will want to know more about the world. They'll want to see more of it. They'll want to, they'll want to explore the lore. They'll want to pull at the threads. They'll want to kick the tires, make sure the damn thing runs. And those books were so important to learning how to do that. Like I can't express enough how important that shit is, right? Like I didn't go to college to get a literary degree, right? I don't have any creative writing background. I don't none of that. None of it. 0%. I learned everything I know from reading those books, hiding under my mom's house. I learned them from reading in the back of classrooms as the jocks threatened to beat my ass. I was that's how I learned to do it. And it's because you pick a theme, you come up with an idea of all the characters and all the stuff you need and all the settings and stuff like that, and it gave you an idea of how to do it, like a step-by-step process of what you would need to build a city, for example, and fill it full of supernatural beings, or to take a character and understand that there is a true nature that they have inside and a demeanor that they present to the world, right? Like two separate, two sides of that. And people who don't have, I've noticed that people who didn't come up with that, sometimes they don't have all that skill set, right? And that's where I got it from. I'm not anyone out there who thinks, hey, man, I need a creative writing degree, or oh man, I can't do this because I didn't go to college or whatever. Fuck that. You hear me?
Yeah.
Fuck that. This writing is one of the purest and truest things that allows us to stand on equal ground, no matter where we come from, what our background is, how much money we got. It's just the words. It is just the damn words that matter, and that's
Yeah, I mean that's true. You're absolutely right. I think a lot of people lose sight of that writing is powerful. Like the stories you come up with can mean a whole lot to people. And I don't know, sometimes people get discouraged because they're afraid they won't make the money off of it. But I mean, it's like you said, what would you say the guy's name was Clinton Boomer or whatever. If you're
yep.
in money, you're gonna go broke.
Yeah, you're gonna go broke, man. If you're in it for the cash, you're gonna enjoy that ramen.
I think people should be in it for the love of writing. The only problem that I see is when people and think they already know everything and then they don't want to improve. But what I like about people like you, you understand that you're always constantly improving, and you understand that in order to progress, you have to keep working at it. And I think that's a really good message that people could pick up on.
One of the weird things here, and this always kind of trips out my more refined writing pals, is a lot of that comes from the idea, like like when it comes from a pro wrestling kind of mindset that when you start out, you're a fucking jobber, kid. You're supposed to be someone's apprentice. You're supposed to pay your dues, eat shit and learn to smile, right? Like I'm a freelancer, ha ha. There's a whole lot of eat shit and learn to smile. And but over time, that's how you learn the craft, right? Like I never wanted to be like I would feel terrible if I was to try to tell any of my mentors or the Seder sensei that I knew something that they didn't, right? Like it seems ridiculous to me. You should always have respect for people who blaze the trails before you, but always be brave enough to blaze your own.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's a lot of times people come in with the attitude where they think if they show respect, then they're somehow like, I don't know, showing weakness or something. And to me, or they think that you have to kiss ass. I mean, there's a difference between kissing ass and showing respect. And I believe it's like if you're part of an industry, and this is almost like, I don't know, if you're part of an industry and you compared wrestling to, and I was actually going to bring wrestling up because I know we're both fans, and you talked about how you pick the names for your characters sometimes. But you made the analogy between wrestling and writing. And again, that's another conversation I was having with someone else today about the similarities. When you enter if you're a guy just starting out and you end up in the room with Ric Flair, right? And you give him your seat, right? Because he's Ric Flair. That's just that's the kind of respect because you're part of an industry. This is an industry you want to be in, right? And you want to succeed. So when you find somebody who has succeeded in that industry and they helped elevate that industry to make it important, well, that keeps it going for new aspiring people, and you want to be part of that, and you should respect those who came before you.
Yeah.
And I think if we built this industry more, this community more on respect and the drive to elevate the entire art form, things would be so much better.
Yeah, there's way too many people who seem to try to tear each other down, or who just don't get that a rising tide floats all ships.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to have you can't be an ass kiss, right? Like I've certainly seen my share of ass kisses, but you also have to respect people who have done it, right?
Yeah,
because it's easy to sit there and be like, oh, Stephen King sucks. Oh man, everybody. I'm going to dump on some Stephen King here. Well, Stephen King sold more books than you have like teeth in your mouth. So
yeah,
I mean,
right. On a bad.
I mean, yeah, you can sit there and you can bitch all you want, but it's not going to change the fact that
Yeah, because when that's the thing, and you talked about people tearing each other down, and I've been in communities that were very bad like that, and I had to get out of them. But the thing is, like when you talk about, it's like one thing when someone is to be like, this book by Stephen King I didn't like as much because, or they're like, the only problems I have with Stephen King's works because. I think it's okay to talk about criticism, but then you have, because that opens up a conversation where everybody who's in it might learn something. But when you get these people who are just trolls and they're just like, Stephen King sucks, it's just like, especially when there are other authors, it kind of looks bad if you cannot articulate why you don't like him.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just stupid. I've had criticisms of some of his work, but again, I respect the hell out of him. Not just because he sold so many books, but because a lot of what he says about writing, I think is brilliant, and I think a lot of his ideas were great. So
proof is in the pudding, right? Like that's
right, yeah.
I think another problem I think that people a lot of times that crops up in the community is we tend to like try to say that one person's type of story or writing is valid and another person's type is lower class. Like I know certain folks feel that those tabletop game design books aren't real writing, and to those people most of them couldn't
I
do it if they put a
disagree
gun
with
to their
that.
head.
I certainly
Couldn't do it if they put a
I
gun to
never
their
got
head.
big into them, but man, they got some serious stories in those.
And there's people who think comic book writers who aren't authors, right? Like they say comic writers instead of authors, right? That's the point. And it's not true. And it's like saying that a jazz musician isn't as good as a rock and roll musician. It's bullshit. It's just it's this weird tribalism thing that people
Yeah,
do.
especially since jazz is part of what made rock and roll.
See, you and the mentor are going to get along real well. He's a music guy too, right? And I'm over here like, yeah, Phil Oaks, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. The tribalism is really bad, and I've seen it. There's a lot of people who dump on erotica. There's a lot of people who take a crap on romance writing. There's people who take crap on horror. There's people who take a crap on splatterpunk writing. I mean, it's everywhere. It's out there, and there's problems. There's going to be problems and criticisms that can be worked on with any genre, but I mean, there's also constructive ways to approach it.
exactly.
And I don't know. I've always kind of been like, and I've gotten wrapped up in the whole people fighting with each other thing before, but there's just this whole,
Yeah,
there's just this whole idea that I don't know. I've always kind of been like, I'm not perfect. I mess up, and I'd rather just move past it. And I think it's people would just, I think so much more could be accomplished. And if people would just like work together and appreciate this art form and come together and like, hey, this is the problem I have. How do we fix it? And kind of build on that.
yeah. Oh well, I mean, there is also the fact that there are certain people who they make their entire living off of other people trying to make their dreams. You know what I'm saying? Like the folks who are like, oh, here's my novel about how to write novels.
Yeah,
like,
unless
Jesus
you're
fucking
Stephen
Christ.
King. Yeah, yeah. I don't know. That's a conversation that I've had with people about. There's a difference between being a teacher and wanting to teach people, right? And that's
Yeah.
just your avenue, and you have those skills, you have that education, and if people want you to come talk at their events about it, then they should pay you for it. But then there's people who are like, to me, already well-to-do, well-known authors. Or just people who aren't even well known, and they're trying to like sell their information to people. They're like, pay me this and I'll do a seminar online to tell you how to be a writer. And it's like, I don't care who you are, even if you're a writer I really like, I don't want to know about writing. I want to know, how do you market yourself? Tell me that. That's what I want to know.
Well, it's an entirely different thing, when like Stephen King writes a book on, how the art of writing, right? Like that's one thing, right?
Yeah, that's
But
a
when
good
some
example.
dude who is like, self-publishing his, my how I became a successful author, and like you look him up, and it's like he's got one novel out, and he's like got three more about how he wrote that novel. And then you're like, maybe this guy don't know shit.
There's a lot of that, and what's worse is when you end up in these writing groups, and there's all these experts in there who've never published anything, like these Facebook groups,
Oh
and
God.
and it's like you try and tell them that, yeah, I've done this and that. I mean, I've tried to give people advice in those groups, and I'm like, I'm nobody. I'll tell them up front, I'm nobody, but I've done a few things, and if you need some help, if you want to learn what's better would go this way or that way, I can give you some advice. But then they'll tell you how you're wrong or something. And it's like, well, I did sell some books. I do know a little bit. I'm just trying to help you, You don't have to be an ass.
Some people, I mean, yeah. The various Facebook groups out there are certainly interesting pits of literature. I think the thing for me is, I've met, a couple of people who, industry folks or whatever, right? Like sometimes, they've crossed my path or whatever. And I've not always had great experiences with them, right? Like I can't sit here and say I've wowed everybody, right? There's been a few folks out there who thought I didn't have what it took, or, that they were better things to do with their time than listen to me or help me out or anything like that. And I like to think that one day I'm going to, mail those bastards a book. But, you can't let people like that drag you down, and you can't let them make you hard towards, other people and other people who are in the struggle, right? The way I look at it is, if I can get up the damn mountain, then it is my moral responsibility to turn around and try to pull as many people up the damn mountain as I can behind me.
I agree.
Selfishness, it might work out for people in the short term, but I'm a big believer that, truth stands when nothing else will. It'll eventually get you.
Yep, I agree. I think it was it Neil Gaiman who said, I've gotten where basically, to sum it up, I've gotten where I've gotten because of all the people who helped me. I've seen that quote floating around. I've never fact checked it myself, but it's true. Like, you should give back when you can, and that's always been my attitude. I've always wanted to help people, and I have the bad habit of, like you just said, letting those people sometimes get to me that are more negative. And my flaw is sometimes not being able to stand up enough where I think I'm standing up to them and doing some good, where I'm actually just doing worse. You said earlier, when you put negative out there, it spreads. And you have to learn to walk away from that kind of stuff. You have to examine yourself and say, all right, these people over there aren't doing it. They're dragging me down. What do I got to do to get past it? And that's the responsibility and that's the message I see you put out there a lot, and I think that's very important.
I would liken it to getting stuck in the mud. You can, sometimes if you just lay on the gas, you'll pull out of it. But sometimes if you lay on the gas, you'll just dig yourself deeper.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you just got to get out of the damn truck and put some blocks under the tires and get her up, right? Like, you have to get out of there.
If that's not the most Appalachian analogy that you could have come up with, I don't know what it is.
I hear that I have a good hand at it. I hear that I do. Lord of mercy.
So, speaking of Appalachia, that's the area from which you are, and how much has that helped some of your ideas? You and I have had some interesting conversations about Appalachian history. You're pretty much a historian on a lot of gone on out there. How much has that helped your writing?
Actually, I think it's really, really helped me. I mean, first of all, I'm working as we speak on the trinity of my 3 Appalachian horror stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hell That Came to Harlan is only the first. But when you learn about the history of this region and the people and the things that they suffered, endured, the ways that they were exploited, you get a really rich, sense of just how important identity and who you are can be to a people, right? Because the first step in breaking any people down is to rob them of their identity, is to take who they are from them, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to make wage slaves, that's how you do it.
Which is something we're still doing today.
Yeah. And when I started writing the dispatches for Appalachia, that was one of the things that, at first I kind of just wanted them to be funny, like little gonzo things. But the more I dug into it, man, the more I started seeing stuff, the history of Blair Mountain, the Battle of Blair Mountain, the murder of Sid Hatfield, the betrayal of the Union miners by Mother Jones, the terrible like atrocities inflicted on these people, wiping out the Melungeons, being nearly wiped out by the eugenics movements of the 30s. You see all of these stories that are forgotten, like nearly completely erased from modern thinking. And we do a lot of effort to preserve like various cultures, and but Appalachia, by virtue of its isolation and the fact that it was under King Cole's boot for so long, it didn't get any of that, right? Like that's one of my criticisms that I sometimes toss out there to the left, right? Like Appalachia is the gap that must be bridged in order to cut into like to cut into the conservative base, right? Like I'm not trying to talk politics. I'm just it is stuff like replacement theory and things get thrown out there, and I think that a really good way to dispel the illusion of that is to show people that we were victims too. We were targeted. We were exploited. We were our gun thugs used to be able to go in your house, beat the shit out of you, rape your wife, whatever, and then it's totally legal like that. And that wasn't even 100 years ago, guys. That is less than 100 years ago. And they paid us in script. What do you call it when you pay somebody with food instead of money?
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm saying, right? Like there's we had a word for that once upon a time.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And our children, our little, our youngins was put to work in coal mines without respirating gear, right? Like silicosis killed 70,000 Kentucky coal miners every 10 years. Every 10 years that the coal industry has existed in Kentucky, the silicosis has killed 70,000 Kentuckians every decade. Just fucking 70,000 people.
Which essentially amounts to 7,000 a year.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of dead people for nobody to give a shit about, right? Like that's a lot of, and it kind of fills me with a fire, right? Like that's one of the things. Like when I'm doing when I did the Hell That Came to Harlan, and I'm having to write about the mining camps and stuff. I went through old newspaper reporter accounts of the Cold War and the camps that the miners were in during those times. That's where the old say, if you've ever heard somebody say hole in a wall big enough to throw a dog through, that's where that comes from, because so many of them were in such terrible conditions in the Appalachian winters. It's just awful, atrocious. And I'm able to utilize their stories, the things that happened to them, and I'm hopefully able to bring it forward and blend it into my own stuff and give voice to my people, right? And I think it's really, really fucking awful that so much of our culture has been stolen from us. We're not Southerners. And you ever want to get me fighting mad, calling Appalachian a Southerner, right?
Yeah.
That ain't going to work. All right. We are not no stars and bars flying cotton folk. That ain't us and wasn't us. That ain't, read your history. But now in the modern era, look at, when you see so many, that's what has slowly eaten us and devoured us, right? This notion that we're all racist or something like that right there, right? Like before the Cold War, most mines weren't segregated, right? A lot of the men who went up and fought on Blair Mountain were black men, right?
Right.
Segregation was brought to a lot of the coal mines only after the Cold War, because it was a way to keep people from unionizing, gathering and talking, and, encourage division, keep people divided, easier to control.
Yep. Yeah. And I think a lot of that shows in your work, that the passion that you have and the knowledge that you have for what you're writing about. But we're cutting short here. We're almost out of time. So I thank you for showing up and talking. And remember, folks, American Mystic, The Life, Death, and Rebirth of Jimmy Wonderful is due out on October 24th. You can pre-order it now on Kindle ebook. So thank you all for watching, and you'll be seeing more from Coyote Wallace and Nightmare Press in the future.
See y'all soon.